Hi. I wanted to discuss some thoughts about my recent letter to the editor. I want to make sure that my ideas kind of push into the intended realms, right, in which I intended. And I suspect most people will miss the complete message that I'm trying to get at, which is, again, they're going to pick a side, right? They're going to read into it like who's at fault, right? When I, mention about people who perhaps have forsaken their Christian values, they're immediately going to decide that it's the other, right? Whoever the other is. So, real quick, I'm going to read it. That way we can kind of play with the ideas. And like, I don't need to be right here. I don't need to have the perfect ideas, but I feel like I have an interesting way to raise and play with ideas, right? And raise topics to that can kind of drive an intellectual curiosity and really, I want to see where this goes. I'm not sure I know where the end of this path is, which is why I end this in a question. And granted, it's more of a rhetorical question, sure, but still. Anyway, a man will be imprisoned in a room with a door that's unlocked and opens inwards, as long as it does not occur to him to pull rather than push it. So that's a Ludwig Wittgenstein quote. Didn't have enough room to actually put that on there. 300 words or less, and keep that down. That was the letter. Anyway, it is now June of 2021, and even now, with the same argument that has been raging for over 40 years, people still believe the same lies. That blue is somehow antithetical to red, and if you identify with one, you're the enemy of the other. Sectarian divisions are now as bad in America as they are in Iraq. Politics is the new religion, and it is one of hate. Ironically, the most devout to this religion are ones who claim their religion is one of love. They've abandoned their Christian values for the excitement of quarterly profits for oligarchs and the extreme and systemic poverty for the flimsy remnants of the middle and working classes. In a corporate environment, there's only winning at all costs, and only those at the top are allowed to win. This is why our government gives Amazon 129 million in tax refunds while auditing poor people to make sure they aren't skimming off the top. It seems we are worse now than at any other time in modern history in terms of Americans at each other's throats. Have you considered, maybe for just a moment, that the billionaires convincing you poor people are the problem are in fact the problem? And so let's play with that a little bit. The Tea Party origins was a real organic outrage of people saying, "What the heck, bro? Like you're pushing me into starvation conditions through pay, and then you're going to tax me even more." And that's not billionaires, right? These were actual scrapping working class blue collar folk. And then what happened? It got hijacked. It got hijacked by Koch brothers. This is well known. And then even the Koch brothers have come out and lamented the fact that they have fueled and fanned the fires of fanaticism within their own political networks. And so they understand that they created a Frankenstein's monster, but like, at what point does that even matter? Like, yeah, I get that you're repentant, but you went ahead and made Frankenstein's monster anyway. Like with the lab leak theory, right? Dr. Fauci may feel bad. I mean, I haven't heard him say, "Hey, I'm sorry, and I take responsibility," even though he's the one who lifted the moratorium on gain of function research, right? So we have people creating these Frankenstein's monsters with no sense of accountability other than I feel bad and my God will forgive me. Well, and that's fine within your own personal spirit, but what about the debt you owe the world for the monster that you've unleashed? What about it? And so let's look at this, right? So politics is the new religion and it is one of hate. To be honest, I can't remember if I actually sent that as the title, or they just abstracted that from my piece. However, how many people from the left, assuming that we can approximate that the left are kind of very social activists, you could maybe call social justice warriors, whether you see that as a straw man or a pejorative or not. And they will look at the right and they'll say, well, look at these people, like Joel Olstein, for instance, right? Houston, there was a hurricane. There were a bunch of poor people that are trying to get out of floodwaters, and they ran up to his church. Please, please, pastor, help, let us in. Meh, he gave him a big middle finger. Oh, I'm sorry. You filthy poor people don't get to mess up my gilded church. Don't you know that when Jesus said, like, when, the way you treat the least amongst us is how you treat me? Don't you know that he was just joking? Because I'm disgusted by you poor people. So bugger off. I mean, is that what we value? I mean, and then, what about on the right? The right, again, if we can kind of approximate the right as, conservatives, maybe traditional Christians who are, working class. I live here in Utah, so I would, guess that the vast majority of the Latter-day Saint population are going to identify with some form of conservatism, whether that's strictly GOP, libertarianism, right? I don't necessarily want to, steal your identity there, nor do I necessarily want to, be too reductive, when I describe the left as well. But anyway, the right will look at the left and be like, well, look at these people talking about how we need to find this intersectionality. And the second that somebody steps outside of that, you are canceled. Like, what? What happened? Was it Kevin Hart, right? And couldn't do the awards. He was canceled for like a bad joke. And it's one thing if somebody is not a comic, right? As a profession, right? Because then, yeah, you just threw something out as a regular dude, and it's not like you're trying to, feed your family, right? This isn't what you do for work, right? And I'm not necessarily excusing something that he said, but I can understand it. I can understand it, especially from that perspective. Maybe there's room to say, well, perhaps he wasn't specifically on a stage at the moment, or it wasn't specifically, and this isn't necessarily to Kevin Hart, right? This really could be fit over anyone, getting canceled who because of a problematic joke. Um, and this isn't people who are saying the quiet part out loud, like, who was that comic who was canceled for a while, came back underground. He always talked about how he would um, do his thing, right? He would massage his stuff in front of women. Well, and come to find out, that's what he would ask a lot too, and is really strange. And I don't know what to do about that. That seems pretty gross. But what happens when the very same people, right? These are leftists who think that they're, my apologies, who, in their hopefully they're honestly in their heart of hearts feel like they are true Christians, right? Maybe Democrats, maybe not even leftists, who, maybe they feel like they're trying to do a service to humanity, but just that canceling, that immediate, like, how dare you have any sort of independent thoughts? How dare you not repeat the narrative? How dare you not introduce yourself by your pronouns so I can be put at ease because I now know how to address you? Well, maybe you shouldn't be put at ease. Maybe life isn't meant to be easy, right? I mean, is it David? No, David Gilmour. David Sinclair. I was going to say David Gilmour, the researcher, but yeah, he's a musician. So David Sinclair recently on Lex Friedman, on Joe Rogan, he talks about that modern conveniences are making us weak, and we aren't people that are born to be able on a biological level to just reach over and grab a snack at a moment's notice. Like, up until this point, ish, right? Ish, say within the last, 80 years, 100 years, the modern conveniences that we've, created and generated just like were so far-fetched and fantastical. And that, and especially as, hunter-gatherers, right? I do intermittent fasting. I fast for 20 hours and then I fit 2 meals within 4 hours. I typically don't snack in between. I do have a young child, so sometimes that makes it, problematic, and it is a little socially restricting. But it balances out my energy. I feel great. I lost a lot of weight that was difficult for me to lose. I feel amazing. My blood pressure's, awesome, and I become stronger by creating a sacrifice. And all throughout the Bible is sacrifice, the importance of sacrifice, the importance of bearing a load, right? This is something that, to be honest, I kind of made fun of and strawmanned quite often, until Jordan Peterson, of all people, somebody whose political views that I don't necessarily buy into, but whose psychological and philosophical views are second to none in the impact that they've had on me. Probably the next philosopher who I've really enjoyed, especially living, is going to be Cornel West. And talk about intersectionality. That's my intersectionality, and I would love to see more people find that intersectionality of Cornel West and Jordan Peterson, and figure out what is the way in which you can better your own individual conditions to become a stronger person, to then actualize a systemic approach to create a good. And that's where I see that Jordan Peterson and Cornel West overlap. And maybe that makes me a strange bird. Maybe I'm just a crazy person. I should just be dismissed. But I think there's real value in seeking to reduce the misery index, especially on a population level. And if we can figure out how to do that on an individual level, we may actually have the ability to talk to others, right? And not get offended by somebody who has a difference of opinion, and figure out that if somebody who thinks differently than me actually has value and input and a strategy that can be executed, that can have produced results that follow my intended purpose. I mean, if we are Christian, right? If we as a population are a Christian nation, and if man is made in God's image, to reach out and reduce the misery index, right? Don't be naive. Don't be naively optimistic and be like, I just want to chase happiness. I just want to be happy, Josh. What are you talking about misery? That bums me out. I don't like that you said misery so many times. I don't like these negative emotions, Josh. I believe that I put positive energy into the world and it comes back. Well, and that is true in a certain regard, but faith without works is dead. What good is energy out if you don't follow it up with action? And if faith without works is dead, then the important part there is works. And if you have works without faith, there's nothing there. There's nothing there that says works without faith is wrong. And that's kind of where I find myself. Like I'm smitten, and I love the poetry of the way that Jordan Peterson breaks down time as the judgmental father. And maybe that's the right way to look at it. And maybe I've been looking at Christianity in much the wrong way. Maybe I've also, duped myself. I mean, maybe, yeah, I have. I've fallen into wokeism, right? I'm not just spitting things that I'm playing with ideas that I have no involvement in. I've really fallen into this idea that capitalism is just this parasitic environment that's terrible for everyone. But it's not capitalism. I mean, is there really a better system than one, at least on paper, right? And certainly we can critique the execution. But on paper, a system that naturalizes and encourages the bubbling up of the best, right? I mean, that's Darwinian, right? I mean, that's survival of the fittest. And if we are actually in a place, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we are actually, helping people get to that self-actualization pinnacle, I mean, that's where we need capitalism. The problem is because of the way we've created starvation conditions, we now have a 1.7 childbirth ratio per couple here in America. I think the desire is like 2.2. So we're not even replacing the people that are here. And that isn't even congruent, right? That's not very congruent with Utah values, especially, Latter-day Saint values, where people want large families, right? But if you are in poverty conditions and don't have the ability to pay for a large family, and then the media then tells you that your poverty is a condition of your lack of morality, are you even in the headspace to help raise and mold positively influencing people? And if we can raise the material conditions up, right, bottom up, if we can raise, and reduce the misery index, if we can take the floor of misery and raise it up, I mean, isn't that kind of a transcendental hand reaching down into hell and lifting people up? And the thing Jordan Peterson says is maybe life is a malevolent hell. And maybe he didn't put it exactly that way. But maybe life is a malevolent hell. But possibly some of that is your own doing. And if you were to stop flagellating yourself, my words, not his, right? Whipping yourself in the back or kneecapping yourself or allowing your imposter syndrome just overwhelm you and to prevent any sort of positive, self actualization in your life. If you were to remove that, maybe life would just become a tragedy. And while that is certainly a pessimistic answer, you've now raised the floor. So if life is now a tragedy, it's no longer a living hell. And certainly a tragedy is better than a living hell. And there's going to come a time, if you keep on that cycle, that your lowest low is going to be higher than your highest high before. And I think there's a real pathway here that's congruent with Christian values, because again, if we are all in the image of God, to reduce that poverty index, to raise and extend a hand and give a hand up, not a hand out, a hand up from hell. I mean, is there a more honorable and noble cause? And if we're able to help people self actualize, I mean, is there anything more spiritual than that? That you actualize your own self improvement? And so we are allowing a network and an infrastructure to feed bread to the body and the soul. And as a Christian, again, is there anything more noble than that calling? If not, what are we going to do about it? If so, please, I'd love to hear it. But this is why I wrote this article. This isn't to say that Republicans are bad and Democrats are good, or Democrats are bad and Republicans are good. This is to say that they're both trash. And anyone who gives in to a billionaire who is like an undead creature, faith without works is dead. Which means that if you're walking around as you're dead, you are undead. And if you are undead and you are then giving your tithing over to a system that is siphoning off the misery of the poor, feeds the coffers of the rich, well, that's a vampire. And no wonder there's a vampiric system if we're walking around as the undead, right? And so, what's the answer there? Maybe we can explore. Maybe we can explore more existential realms. I am a nerd, and it's probably backwards. The Cleric Quintet, R.A. Salvatore, right? I've read a lot of other books, but I really identify with Catterley, partly because I'm a guy who wasted a lot of time. Catterley did too. He didn't get to a place where his real skills came into place until he allowed himself to be pushed there. And then once he got pushed there, he willingly strapped it on and grabbed his sacrifice and willingly grabbed his burden and then continued on that path. And that's beautiful, right? And if you can help people, if you can truly help people in your individual life, in your family, your kids, your spouse, and then you can raise your material conditions to become a leader within your community, to then help others in your proximal location, right? Again, is there any more true noble cause? Feeding the body and the soul? I mean, I don't think so.